Okay, so everybody, thank you for coming to the first session of our Transportation Committee. Um, At the onset, a couple things for the agenda to figure out who amongst you is going to be leading this group of folks. I am not an actual official member, a voting member of this committee. It was decided by the select board that I would just act as a representative to the select board and to also participate as a non-voting member. Why I can't vote is at this point superfluous. But if at any time anybody feels as though I am overstepping my authority or abusing my powers, please let me know, because it is not my goal to sway this committee in any way, shape, or form. I just want to state that out loud and for the record that I am here as a very interested individual, which is why I went forward to form this committee. So with that being said, thank you all for being here. Thank you all for volunteering. I think we have everybody. Yes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Who are we missing? We are missing the other Melissa.
Oh, yeah.
That's who we're missing. Okay, no worries. Unless she is call-in user 2, which is entirely possible. Hit unmute here. Call-in user 2, could you unmute and identify yourself?
Hi, can you hear me, John? Nick?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I think I'm unmuted, which makes me hear. So I'm glad I'm able to hear. And Nick, I don't know, because I just got on, is Eileen and Pat can't come tonight, but they really were interested, and they are hoping that this will be recorded, and they just wanted me to be sure that it was. Is that accurate?
Oh, yeah. Yep, the big red light's blinking.
Okay, sounds wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, so we're just missing over that. So for tonight, I'll act as your record keeper. Go ahead and pull up the agenda so we have it.
Nick, this is Millie again. Would it be possible to ask while we're waiting who are the members of the committee?
Sure, yeah. If everyone wants to go around and introduce yourselves for the call, by all means.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Ernie Cavino. I'm a member of the planning board, planning board's representative on this committee.
I'm Marge
Great.
McDonald.
Hi, Ernie.
Marge McDonald, Director of the Council on Aging.
Melissa Interest, I'm on the Burlington Youth and Family Services Board.
I'm Jeremy Harrington. I'm a member of the community.
Catherine Bond, and I am a member of the school committee.
Great. Great. Thank you.
Rick, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Rick Barker, Town Meeting Member Precinct 7, also President of the Burlington Area Chamber of Commerce.
Excellent. So as everyone can see, the intent was to get as many stakeholders when it comes to transportation as involved in this conversation. I think that we're hitting a certain critical mass from the town where a lot of different pieces are starting to come together. And now is probably the exact right time to have a committee of this type exist. You know, coming off the heels of town meetings report and everything that's going on with economic development and the shift of businesses because of the pandemic, you know, the hope is that this committee can take some action moving forward. Going to go ahead and jump to agenda item number 2, which is discussion of meeting time. So do Wednesdays at 6:30 work for everybody as a permanent fixture? Or do we want to have different meeting times? Obviously, every other Monday is lousy for me. But I'm happy to make accommodations for folks.
It depends on what Wednesdays you do it, because I have a once a month meeting, which I have like tonight right after.
Okay.
It's hard for me to
Sure.
make both.
Anybody else with a conflict at this time?
I'd say Wednesdays are good for me just because I'm already here.
Right. That's right. You're here. Your meetings are on Mondays and Mondays, right?
Mondays, only once every 3 months. though, so
And
that's,
You're on Thursday.
Thursday, every other Thursday, first and third.
Any conflicts? Oh, Wednesday, so it's easy for me to get in. Great.
And school committees
Any
do,
conflicts moving forward?
but
So as long as.
Rick,
Wednesdays are good for me. This is Rick.
good for you? Okay, excellent. So then what we'll do is, Catherine, I'll coordinate with you in terms of when your meetings fall. I think to start, we'll aim for once a month, maybe twice a month. We'll see how it kind of nets out in terms of conversation. I think at least to start like this, and then we'll, aim for one in November, and we'll see how we get through the holidays. And then we'll kind of go from there. All right. Obviously, we want actionable goals for this committee, but so once a month might not be feasible with open meeting law, but we'll see how it kind of shakes out. So we'll coordinate that. Wednesday seems to be kind of shaking out pretty good. Okay. You folks need a chair, vice chair, and a recording secretary. So go ahead and fight for those. I should also state for the record that I think moving forward, we can keep these pre-remote. I think that, the current state of state law with the governor allows us, we were saying earlier, April, I think is when the emergency allowability for folks to be remote almost on a permanent basis is fine. So we can do that. Because the reason I bring that up is because if we were not, then the chair and a quorum would need to be present in the room for the meeting to actually occur. So consisting of the chair and with the vice chair, in case there was hesitancy around taking the positions.
You're talking only remote is what you're saying.
So I think for the time being, we can stick with only remote. And if we feel like we need to get in person or, it's a certain amount of documentation that needs to be reviewed in person, we can kind of have those kinds of conversations over you. So who amongst you wishes to nominate yourselves or one of your fellow committee members for one of these fantastic seats? Don't all chomp at the bit. I know it's exciting.
You want to be chair?
Well, I was going to say, my intent is to get a board member to take over this. So
Oh, okay.
that was the original intent, but I don't have anybody at the moment. So I think I'm probably the wrong person for any officer jobs.
How about Rick? Rick?
I don't think my mute and unmute is working properly right now. I certainly plan on being an active member of this committee. And I'll stand down at this moment until I hear other people stepping up.
Okay.
But thank you, Ernie. What about
Anytime,
Ernie?
anytime.
Ernie,
I wouldn't mind being vice chair if somebody else was willing to be chair, Catherine.
I right now have I'm vice chair right now for school committee. So if I became chair and
Can you
it's going to be way too.
be chair, huh?
I can't, as a non-voting
You
member.
could be a non-voting chair, can't you? No?
I mean, I guess I could. I don't know what the legality is around that, but
Second the motion.
The chief executive person.
maybe we should nominate the one who's not here.
there you
oh
go.
gosh. Oh.
That's mean.
Maybe a little.
So look, if you guys would prefer that I take chair for now, I'm happy to do so. And then at such time as Amy or somebody else tells me I am not allowed to do so, we can revisit
Which will be
this.
tomorrow when you ask her.
I was gonna say, yeah, I'm gonna leave here tonight and email her.
Actually, speaking of which, Melissa still needs to be sworn in.
Yeah, who's swearing it? Yeah, who's swearing it?
Amy will finalize the search.
Is she coming up?
She said she was gonna come up to take care.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll make sure that happens.
Because I was going to go last week and you said you were.
Right. I like to make your life difficult, yeah, sorry.
You know,
So a motion to make Nick chair in lieu without any objections to it, or Amy saying he can't be chair. I've
Second
made a
that
motion.
Second that motion.
All in favor, say aye.
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 That's your Nick.
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Aye.
Last.
And I'd also like to make a motion for Ernie Cavino for vice chair because he spoke up.
I'll
Yeah,
second.
See, I knew. Fine.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Rick seems to run a good meeting.
Yeah.
No, but he's terrible at making records, so.
Well, look, I'm happy,
Segue, good segue.
as a non-voting member, I'm happy to maintain recording clerk for now. Again, until we can either people's schedules adjust or what have you. All right.
Motion for Nick to not only be chair, but to be recording clerk.
Second,
So, all in favor?
Aye.
aye.
He's stealing your job.
Nick, you're doing good so far.
Thanks,
Okay,
thanks.
take over, Nick.
Yeah.
You want to be vice chair too?
He'll sit on all three, yeah. All right, that takes us to our next order of business, which is our initial discussion for what we want to have happen. I hope this as broad as humanly possible while being as detailed as possible per agenda filling, but basically we want to open the discussion around the town meeting report. I hope everyone had a chance to peruse, if not thoroughly read it. They had some very particular action items they were hoping to see from their report. And then, how we want to see this committee move forward. So I'm going to open it up for discussion, starting with the report and folks' thoughts around that.
I looked at that report so long ago.
Yeah.
Don't all jump in at once.
All right, I'll start, Nick. Thank you. There's been, without even referring to the report, I think everyone knows, Burlington is primarily a car-oriented town. While we do have some public transportation, through the MBTA, the LRTA, and up until recently, the B line and/or whatever other names it was, it's a very difficult town to get around without a car. Biking, while I think we all would like to see, increased bike use throughout the town, there are safety issues and it's something that we have to look to move forward to. One of the most important things is finance, and any of the ideas that we come up with there'll have to be a discussion on how we finance these things. I do think that through, the CARES Act, ARPA funding, there is money out there. And I think now is a time for us to be able to actually do something where in years past, it may not have been something that could have been funded. So as we have these discussions, I think we should open up to anyone and their opinions on what we think we should do, but we should also look at, there's going to be a financial component to any of it, unless we're going to just put out the hat and try to make, collections at these meetings. So I want to make sure that we keep in mind there is a financial consideration for anything that we propose. But that being said, I think now is the time for ideas to come forward to really try to make a difference and make Burlington more easily accessible to all.
Yeah, I definitely couldn't agree more, Rick. From a funding perspective, I know that we are actively pursuing a larger conversation with the MPO. And I know John Strauss is on the call today, who has been following that very closely. And so John will probably pick your brain about that for sure. The MPO has a longer lead in terms of the way it finances and budgets and funds. So they're opening currently their cycle for the 23 to 27 plan. So it's a massive planning process for anyone who isn't aware of it. I think that for medium to long-term, goals that this committee deems, worthwhile, that would be hopefully a great funding opportunity and source for us. And then for anything more short-term, we'll obviously want to look more, inward or, more short-term, grants might be popping up, whether it be state or federally, funded. Because I think, Rick, you're right. I think that funding is obviously, if not the most important, one of the top, things that we need to solve for in this. But I also want to say, and this is the shtick I've been on for what feels like at least a year, is I don't want logistics to be the murderer of good ideas. I feel like we should tackle this from a strategic and actionable perspective. That means it means breaking it down from short-term actionable goals to medium to long-term, and then matrix that against funding. That's fine, but I want us to tackle the problem from a how do we solve this, not a okay, what's the nearest most available triage that we can apply to this. And maybe the answer is both, right? Maybe we can find a short-term solve and then a long-term solution. But I don't want us to negate the long-term solution because of a short-term solve. So just from where I'm coming from in terms of that perspective, one thing I hear, unfortunately, a lot of just in general, it seems, this past year is that once we hit that logistical roadblock, it's like, oh, well, then let's just table that for now and we'll do something easier. I would rather this committee tackle things head on, in my humble opinion.
Look at it more like brainstorming than anything, so you don't have those blocks to.
Yeah. Like, so for example, one of the recommendations in the town meeting report was to bring on a transportation coordinator, right? I know a while back we had a transportation coordinator, and that role was after that person retired, was absorbed into the DPW. So does it make sense for us to bring back a transportation coordinator, right? And again, I don't want to look at this as like one-off, like, is that the right answer, right? I want us to start big and brainstorm and say, okay, from a holistic perspective, from a complete streets perspective, from a, what we want to see in this town perspective, where are we? And then we can hone down, right? And to be honest, I think that the first couple of meetings might be us just trying to figure that out, and that's fine. But, we want to make sure that we kind of focus down on what and the why without getting too hung up on the how. And I agree. Hi, Amy.
I think,
We'll get to you in 1 second.
no problem at all.
I think that the how is problem number 2 almost for us to solve. So, Jeremy, you have the report in front of you. What else was town meeting recommending?
Well, they did recommend, it sounds almost like a transportation coordinator, because it sounds like there's different silos within the town that are looking for aspects of transportation, just to get somebody to cut across those silos, bring a holistic perspective. Sounds like it's a good solve for some of that. Some other things were, they were worried about people being able to find transportation, people having safe transportation, kids having safe transportation, kids having a way to get to after-school activities who don't have access to that. To me, it sounds like if we could identify some of these gaps and some of these problems, we could lay them out into what's low-hanging fruit we could get quickly, easily, cost-effectively, but have a multi-stage plan that gets us, here are the longer-term things that we need to look for that maybe fit in that 2023 to 2027 ask, and some other things that we could budget for in more of a medium phase. So I think the identification of those, figuring out the solves, putting a dollar on them and seeing how they lay out is probably a good way to go forward.
And I also think I know one of the, last year, some of the students were saying what you were just saying, it's, trying to stay for after school activities, and there aren't buses and there aren't ways to do it. And it may be ways to do it that won't cost the town too. It's getting parents to coordinate, carpooling, find a way to maybe set up a website or do something to do that. I mean, I know as a Pop Warner coach, there were even parents who had kids on one field and kids on the other. And as a coach, I would drive one kid to the other field to meet the parent. And if you can get enough of that, it may not always cost us money if we can figure out a way to coordinate. And I want us to try and be as creative as we can, especially from the student side of it, to try and get them where they need to go and not cost the town more money.
Yeah, for sure. It's a great idea. Any thoughts?
John does.
John, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Nick. And that looks like an impressive committee that you've assembled. Just speaking from a person who's on the transportation committee for a while, what we had hoped to establish with the committee for the selectmen and then the committee for the town is a way for, as you mentioned a little bit about the siloing. We want to have somebody that is able to coordinate and take input from all the different departments, and especially as Rick mentioned, the funding, because to obtain some of this funding, you have to get on to these representatives like the RTAC and the CDPC. You have to have some interface with MassDOT, which is the North Shore Council. So that would be one of the things that the committee would want to try to see if members are going to be able to go to these separate meetings, like I've been going to those meetings. And then you get integrated into the funding schemes and you begin to take the proposals that you're going to come up with, which represent Burlington, and then bring them to the different committees for their approval. So the prospects too of, again, you know, the Safe Routes to Schools, I was just reviewing that meeting, which they had last night, and Bob Kuna was is getting integrated with Judy Crocker about how that's going to work. And that might help to alleviate some of that after school stuff. But again, the point is just simply to try to bring the problem with Burlington, as we discovered from the Transportation Committee, was just very simply that it's all over the place all the time. And it's just, we want to try to bring it together, put a little common sense to it, try to get on, as Nick brought, as you brought out, get into the funding lockstep so that we can get on a conveyor belt, basically, so our projects can come up and get funded. And we're talking about, you know, Peach Orchard Road. We're talking about the intersection there by Star Market, Cambridge Street, and I can't remember the other street right now, Wynn Street. So some of those things are projects that these kind of bodies that are associated with the state and federal government. The MPO is federal money. These are the projects that they have money for. So it will save the town in the end. And that's about all I'm going to say right this minute. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Mr. Chairman, Millie to Chairman. Hi, I put on chat, my hand was raised virtually. I want to say I really welcome this committee getting organized and taking part in what I think is a key component to success in Burlington. We're really interested in the economic end of it, but in order to make the economic end work, we need to be able to get people around without the gridlock that can sometimes happen. And last night at the school committee, there was an excellent discussion from what I've heard of the safe routes to school. And I think one of the things I'd like to add to what John said about the safe routes to school, that was one of the Transportation Committee's primary recommendations because, as one of your members said, it's one of the low-hanging fruit. We are, I believe, currently signed up. The interesting thing is last night when they were talking, it was made clear that it isn't just the schools that are involved in safe routes to schools. This should be a component for the entire town. I know from having ridden my bike around the high school when school is letting out that there is major gridlock in the whole Cambridge Street area for quite a while before the school lets out. The traffic is backed up all the way on the high school road and up to the middle of town. And that impacts not just the students, but everybody else. And I think when I taught at Marshall Simons Middle School, there was a problem which hasn't gotten any smaller that as the high school students who did research found about, over 50% of the kids get to school by something other than buses. But the thing that's important to know is that if the select board sees that that's part of their mandate as well, because when there is gridlock twice a day at every school in town, that's a problem that isn't just school-based, it affects the whole town. And when the discussion was on that subject last night, it was pointed out that after you have interacted with the powers that be of the Safe Routes to School, after 6 months, you are eligible to apply for grants. And so that is one of the places where the help that we could get comes without cost to the town because it's federally funded. So I think that it would be a good procedure for the select board subcommittee to make it clear that they would be available to be a part of the Safe Routes to School, because the safe routes to school are the sidewalks and the streets that all of us use all day, and we're all impacted by kids getting to school safely. So I hope we'll consider that as part of what could be a recommendation from the Transportation Committee.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. Thank you, Mrs. Nash. Catherine, so, I mean, we're talking about the, safe routes to school. I missed last night's meeting. How did it go?
So I know, well, so Christine Monaco had asked the question. I think her concern was that particular recommendation was trying to encourage kids to not take the buses, and she didn't want buses to be taken away. So to me, that was the thing that got most clarified last night, is that's not the goal. The goal is really to give children a safe way to get into school, whether it's riding your bike or walking, and so the parents feel comfortable allowing them to do so if they choose not to take the bus anymore. Because, I think what we learned last year with COVID and with the buses limiting the number of children, there are more kids riding bikes and walking, and parents are doing that. And I think it was people actually, the feeling I got was that the parents that were, at first, I think it was difficult coordinating it, right? But I think once everyone got into the routine, I mean, it's good to be out in the fresh air, and kids were enjoying riding the bikes, but you don't want to do it if it's not going to be safe. And you can't always have a parent, walking with the children, riding their bikes or whatever. So if we can find a way to coordinate that with this, the recommendations, so that the kids all have a safe way to get to and from, and so that parents don't have to be there. I think, to me, that's an ultimate goal. I mean, certainly go if you feel the need, but it'd be nice to let them have a little freedom too. Right.
So as I've been sitting here listening to everyone talk, I've been taking a couple notes. I think a solid next step would be to reach out to everyone who's not in this room, who we need to talk to. And, loop in people who, to Mr. Strauss's earlier point around, the need for a transportation coordinator. Obviously, we don't have that. We have this committee, and we have the folks across the hall in our admin office, and we have, our individual boards. So I'm thinking we should be talking to engineering. We should be talking to the sidewalk committee. We should be talking to Bob Kuna as he advances, with the Safe Routes to School. Melissa to talk to us across the hall from an economic development standpoint. Who else? Who else should we be talking to? Obviously, the goal is to include as many, boards and committees that would have a stake in this conversation here, but
it might be a good idea to reach out to the principals of the schools too, because they're the ones who are seeing what the traffic patterns are like in each of their schools. I mean, haven't had to do it for many years, but I was one of the guilty parents driving my child to school to give them the extra half hour of sleep because they were up to past midnight doing homework, right? So, but I think they might have some input too, from what they see.
But it paid off, didn't it?
Sure did.
Is there a way that, and I'm not familiar with the report that the Transportation Committee came up with, the town meeting, I'll make sure I do get into it, but it seems like we have a lot of transportation assets in the town, both public and private, but I don't think, do we know what they are, number one? Number two, is there a way that maybe some of those could be shared in at least the short term?
Yeah, that's a really great question.
And because I equate transportation with reducing the amount of traffic, obviously. And traffic has always been one of the biggest complaints in this town, and maybe not some, I don't know, I'm not getting around the town as much as I used to, but maybe not so much now with the lack of people in offices, but hopefully that's coming back. And when it does, that's our lifeblood, to be able to move around the town, because, that businesses won't come here if their employees keep complaining, when I go out for lunch, it takes me an hour and a half to get back.
Right.
That kind of stuff.
John
Yeah.
had his hand up.
Oh, yes, John, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Nick. I just wanted to say, I guess it's Catherine. When Bob was talking about his interaction with Judy, one things that Safe Routes to Schools will do for free is a pickup and drop off survey. So they watch the patterns of how people drop their kids off and how they come to pick them up. So that's something that can be done. We don't have to really do anything, but just kind of stick, stay on the conveyor belt, and the Safe Routes to School program will take care of that stuff, because that's what they're interested in. Is, as Judy Crocker said in one of her best slides, parents are not stuck in traffic. Parents are the traffic, which I always thought was kind of cool. So, and then the other question about if you read the report, that's something that we're trying to focus on as the Transportation Committee, was to understand that the commuting problems of going to Boston, et cetera, like that, that's handled by the MBTA. And I was just on a Better Bus meeting a little bit earlier. But in Burlington itself, that's what we were trying to focus on. Right now, we have the micro transit solution, which is the LIFT program. And then if that can be improved or modified, that's something we should, that's a good committee a question to debate, et cetera. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John. Rick, I saw your hand go up, so I'm going to go to you next. And then we're going to pause and let Amy swear in those of us who have not been sworn in yet. And then we can get back to it. So Rick, go ahead.
Okay, great. I just wanted to follow up on Ernie's statement about the daytime population and the businesses. We've been doing a lot of work recently to try to get an idea of when businesses plan on coming back and when we can expect, the amenities that Burlington is so rich in to be able to enjoy that daytime population. Unfortunately, the answer is not good. A lot of the companies that are here, the larger companies that are tech-based, their employees have gotten used to a work from home environment and are probably going to continue doing that for the foreseeable future. So one of the keys as we migrate, into more life science companies, a lot of the people coming into that industry are younger people that don't have cars. So they may be, getting here from Alewife or through public transportation, but then are kind of locked into the company while they're here. And it's important for us to be able to activate transportation during the day to those people, to get them to the amenities, to get them to the small businesses, to keep, Burlington viable with all of the businesses that have depended on that daytime population. Previously, most of the people that came here during the day were here in a car, so they could get from, location to location. That's going to change quite dramatically going forward. So I think having some options for people to get from, maybe an office park to the mall or Third Ave or to Leahy is going to be critical in order to attract those businesses to come in here.
It's a great idea.
And I was going to comment too that, a lot of businesses are doing what they call hybrid. I think it's going to make it harder to predict patterns for traffic, because you're Monday through Friday, you knew it was, 9 to 5 or 8 to 4, whatever, and you kind of knew when everything happened. But I know at least where I work, there are people who are in 5 days a week, like I am. Then there are a group of people who are 100% going to be allowed to work from home. And then they're the hybrid people. And that just means they can come in 1 day a week, or they have to be in 3 days a week. And it could be Thursday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It's not set. So I think it's going to be difficult to study traffic patterns. So I think, to support what you were saying, that, trying to have some sort of public transportation to be able to let people move around town to go out to lunch or whatever, because that would help, help us with the backup in traffic and whatnot, because it's going to be so hard to predict, not knowing who is going to be in that hybrid.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Amy, we turn to you.
Okay.
To swear us in, those of us who haven't been sworn in.
A couple people have come in and signed up, Jeremy, Marjorie, and Rick, so you guys don't have to get sworn in again. But the rest of you need to rise and raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I
Catherine Bond,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully and impartially
I will faithfully and impartially
discharge and perform
discharge and perform
all the duties incumbent upon me
all the duties incumbent upon me
on the Transportation Subcommittee
on the Transportation Subcommittee
according to the bylaws of the town
according to the
and the laws of the Commonwealth. Congratulations. So I just need to have you guys sign in on my slip here.
Amy, I signed with my old name, but I wrote my new name.
Okay.
I don't think, I,
You're excused.
I-
You're not confusing.
I have something else to hand you and turn this into.
Okay. That's perfect, yeah. So you don't have to sign the slip.
Oh, I don't have to sign that? Oh.
thank you.
Yay. So I need to have a,
Is that,
And to Steve Rolls.
if it's on my kind of roster still on this, it's fine.
but it's like, I haven't like changed anything yet. This legal,
Yeah, so we still haven't gotten it back
I
though.
heard, I'm gonna have Steve text her. So,
We still,
I had
well, I have so much to do and I'm going out for surgery on my foot, November 11th. So I'm thinking I can do a lot of this while I'm recuperating, but I can't if I don't.
you don't have the paper.
So much easier when I did it the first time.
All right, so while we're signing the paper, what makes the most sense in terms of next steps, right? We want to put together an Excel sheet, a matrix of some kind, detailing, what we need. Then we also want an Excel sheet of like assets and transportation, I guess, halves, right? So I think like on that list, we could say, okay, here are the accessible vehicles that we have, but also like we have the MBTA in town. We have like, we want to make sure that we list all the opportunities, but then we also want to have a list of who we need to talk to. Now, three separate things. Don't make me assign you each to something. How do we want to tackle this? Who wants to kind of start in on what? It can be a teams thing. But I think that we need to start putting these lists together.
Nick, this is Rick. I'd be happy to take on current assets,
Okay.
putting together what the MBTA, LRTA, and town assets are.
I'll work with Rick on that, since I think I have some of them.
Excellent. And I will forward you guys, I had gotten a list of all of our actual vehicular assets, which I mean, Margie, but
Yeah,
it lists everything, so we can just have a good insight.
When we get that, we get a perspective of when they're in
I
use.
know, I don't just.
We might have to drill down into each individual department to ask like how they're used. Because like, especially for like, youth family services or COA, right? Like I know that, that the when they're used is different than the how they're used. And it's not always the same. So to answer that question might be trickier, but I would ask Rick and Marge that where you can answer those questions, because you know some of them, go ahead and do that. And then we'll use some time to follow up and find out, more. It's a fair question though, right? Because if, we have the youth family services van, but it's only being used one day a week, right? Like how else might it be able to be utilized?
If something's used during the day and there's a need in the evening, can we better utilize the app?
Absolutely, absolutely. All right,
And can we, because I have one vehicle we can't use for anything but seniors.
exactly, which is another great question.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Grant.
Thank you, Amy.
Which
Be back.
relates.
As the other group is meeting.
At 7:30, so. it's
Okay.
10 minutes.
Yeah.
So technically, the who we need to talk to has already been started to compile, so I can formalize that into an actual Excel sheet that we can use to start tracking. So then the third thing would be to start to look at, I guess, to get a list of all of our wants and all of our, like, I'm trying to think the best way to handle this, right? Because there's a wants list and we need to cross section that against the current state of things, right? So, like if one of our wants is going to be sidewalks, well, what's the current state of sidewalks? And we should obviously talk to the sidewalk committee. So I think the third list is a little bit more surface, but I think that we need to start putting pen to paper and at least looking at something. So I'm actually happy to start working on that if somebody else wants to join me.
I'll give you, sure.
And please do put transportation coordinator on there.
I can help with that too.
I'm putting an immense amount of time into the LIFT program.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Okay, so then what we can do is, since the four of us are going to work on that, each of you can email me thoughts that you have separately, and then I can compile it into one list,
Sure.
and then I'll share that out during our next meeting.
So what are you gonna, what are you gonna type, wishes and wants? What's?
Yeah, so I think like we should look at the report, because obviously like
Okay.
using, coordinator makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
So if it's that, if it's complete streets, if it's, safe routes to
Okay.
school, and then we can start to like say, okay, if it's complete streets, what's involved with complete streets and what do we think we kind of already have, right? And then we can kind of just matrix it and break it down. Because I think before we even get into like the funding of it, we need to know kind of where we are and where we want to advance to from a strategic perspective.
Susan,
Confused yet? So,
she's under you.
Under me. Maybe I should reveal that information.
No, it's just, that's what I thought, so.
The transportation manager in Lexington reports to me.
And what's your position?
She's human services.
Human Services. Thank you.
Susan Barrett, she was quoted in the report, in fact, so.
Yes.
indeed, she was, yeah.
She's
So
very good.
she is, she's very thorough.
Is she full-time, out of curiosity?
She is full-time, yep. And we have a transportation assistant too, who's part-time. Is it John?
Yeah. John, 1 second. That actually raises another thing that we should also be thinking about too, in terms of saving money. Or not spending much money.
Yeah.
Is the notion of, when it comes to transportation, what makes sense from a regionalization perspective, right?
So we're working with 128 Business Council right now to do a regionalization plan that will include funding recommendations. That should be done in early calendar 22, the
Right.
plan, which would include inviting all neighboring towns to participate or not, or whatever it may be. We don't know exactly what the recommendation is yet, but it will be mapped out in the plan, hopefully, as long as we can get funding, so.
Awesome. Okay, excellent.
And Middlesex 3, I'm sure, I know has a transportation committee.
Yes.
I don't know how that could interact, but
Yeah. So right now, our town administrator, Paul Sagarino, attends a fair amount of those. And I know that Mike Running and I have been to a couple.
Yep.
Obviously pre-COVID, before things got really, really dicey. And now they're picking things back up again.
right.
That'd be another organization to, make sure that we're looped in on. So I'll make a note of that. And then we should obviously see what they'll be talking about moving forward.
One question I had about the report is that, I want to look through it more deeply, but in terms of the number of, and maybe John can help answer that if he participated in writing that, but in terms of the number of people who were talked to and surveyed, does that feel to this committee like that is representative of the, sort of the town's needs? Or are there gaps or different pockets of groups that we still may need to talk to?
Get into the question again.
Yeah.
John, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, when we conducted the survey part and when we brought people in to speak in front of the committee, we were able to get a hold of, all the town departments except engineering. And that's something I just wanted to mention as you include it. Be sure to have somebody from engineering, or Tom Hayes, or whoever wants to come in, because those people are connected with MassDOT, and some of the money to complete streets is run through that. But the other part, we got great responses from the kids. We had a survey, and over 1,000 kids responded to the survey, so that was fantastic. But we fell a little short with the seniors, and we didn't get we got kind of an anemic response from them. So that would be an area to try to improve. And then unfortunately, we just sort of, with all the different things that were happening last year, we kind of ran out of time, so we never really had a chance to talk to Rick and anybody in the Chamber of Commerce. We talked a little bit to Melissa, so the business community wasn't really, we felt, represented so that's an area that you guys would want to pick up on. Thank you.
Excellent. Mrs. Nash, I see your hand up.
Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman? Hi, Mildred Nash again, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 3. What you have said in the last half hour or so is really heartening, because having you look at individual segments of the town and getting cross connections with them, I think is a big factor in making a difference. We talked, as John said so eloquently, with virtually every department in town, and we found all of them had issues and interests and things that could help, but there was almost no interconnection between them. And so one of the things that I think is very difficult to assess, but may be something that your committee could look at, is talking about getting a coordinator sounds like money, and money is always a problematic kind of issue. But what is harder to see is the kind of things that Melissa does for the economic community. If there were a traffic coordinator, it would play with the economic development, so that if the two of them were cross-coordinating with all of the various entities in town, the amount of success that would come from that would generate money that is not so clearly seen as a line in the budget that says you're paying X number of dollars for a traffic coordinator. Someone who's able to get grants, who is aware of what is out there to be had, who can interact with people in other communities. For instance, in Lexington, where their traffic coordinator is incidentally not a full-time job, but a part-time job, that the amount of savings that are accrued, things like the wear and tear on the city streets, or the town streets, by all of the UPS and Amazon Prime and all of these bigger vehicles who are coming to deliver the stuff that nobody can go get for themselves. Those kind of things need to be weighed against what it costs to have a coordinator. And so I'm glad to see that Rick and some of the other of you have offered to try to make those cross connections, because I think that's one of the things which is really important to have. And this is a committee that might be able to do that successfully. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Nash. All right, so I know that we're technically at time for today's meeting. I wanted to keep it fairly tight so we could talk, and I figured there'd be a lot of actionable things to walk away with this from, which there clearly are. So I'm going to open it up for final thoughts, and then I believe that what we'll do is we'll take our assignments. Anyone who's not been particularly assigned anything, if you think of anything, feel free to email me directly, and then I can help coordinate from that perspective. Melissa Mazzato, I see that you did join us a while ago. I just want to acknowledge, thank you for joining us. She's our other at-large position. So she did make it. So thank you very much. But
thanks, guys. Sorry, today definitely got away from me with Mount Hope being closed, so I apologize.
Oh, no worries, please. It must be the full moon, because I don't know what's going on there today. Anyways, final thoughts, and then I'll take a motion for adjournment. No? All right.
Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
Next.
Thank you.